and welcome to the Smarter Together webinar series. This is the headline for our fall series that we started over the summer as a better way to connect on really important community research impact projects that were happening across our state and nationally. We are really happy to start the fall with our final presentations from our winners of the Georgia Smart Community Projects. So in the past, we had a in-person conference which allowed our 4 communities to present their final projects, but obviously now we have devoted the month of September for each of our winning communities to do a deeper dive on their projects and obviously lessons learned, what worked, what didn't, as well as, ultimately the impact that it had on their community and hopefully models for others. My name is Deborah Lamb, and this is part of our Georgia Tech Smart Cities and Inclusive Innovation initiative. And I would be really honored to introduce our first speaker, Katie O'Connor, who is a senior planner at the City of Woodstock, to kick off with what Woodstock has done around their master plan and smart city plan over the course of the year. So thank you so much. A few housekeeping rules, obviously. If you have, please keep your video and your audio off. If you have any questions, feel free to write those questions down on our Q&A on the bottom of your screen. It has a QA function. We also have a chat box, so if you have any additional comments, feel free to send it to us, and we'll be answering all the questions that you send to us after the presentation in the final 10 minutes or so of the webinar. So feel free to send your questions to us. We'll also open it up for additional questions that I may collect in the interim too. So without further ado, thank you, Katie, and welcome.
Thank you very much. It is great to be here today. First, I would like to introduce other people helping me on this presentation. We've got Eric Lusher from Pond & Company, Ramachandra Sivakumar from Georgia Tech, who's running the presentations and will also be giving part of the presentation, and Katie Leggett behind the scenes from the City of Woodstock. So thank you to all of you. So I'll start with a brief overall project framework. So this is year 1. We are working on, or we're finishing up the planning for this project. All of these things you see here under this planning category, we have completed and are working on our final deliverables now. Year 2 is going to be pilot projects, and so we hope to take one of the technologies highlighted in our plan to the pilot stage, and then hopefully in year 3 we will begin full plan implementation. Next slide, please. So project overview of year 1, which is what we've been doing for the last year. It's a Smart Woodstock citywide strategy that would apply to the whole city, and a downtown corridor study, which is a more specific planning document that talks about projects we can do in the identified corridor area, which is the main intersection in town that you can see here on the right, and the 4 streets that emanate from it. Next slide, please. This is an overview of the project team. You can see in the green boxes here, we've got the Pond team, our consultant team, and Modern Mobility Partners, who is their sub-consultant. And then on the city side, we have a collection of high-ranking city officials that are the main decision makers in the city helping us with these projects. So the directors of economic, community development, economic development, and public works are part of our team. We've got city management on the team. We've also got a collection of advisory partners. Black Airplane, which is a local Woodstock tech startup, and some city leadership are advisory partners. And then, of course, we have our Georgia Tech research partners, and we had a wonderful intern over the summer, Katie Pop, and we'll be sharing some of her work with you today also. Next slide, please. So talking about the motivation to become a smart community, the reason that we applied for this project in the first place is because we saw a real need in Woodstock to balance pedestrian comfort and safety, because our downtown is a really booming, walkable, busy place. And And we need to balance that with vehicular efficiency and commuter throughput because, the main corridor going through town that's in our study area is also a highly trafficked commuter corridor. And it carries people going from Roswell and Alpharetta back to their homes on the other side of Woodstock and Town Lake Parkway. And so, when we're not having big events and a lot of activity downtown, people feel like they can drive pretty fast on that road. It's Arnold Mill Road. And so that's one of the main issues that kind of sparked my interest in this project was, how can we have that balance where we don't have people complaining about traffic constantly, but we also don't have traffic that's going too fast to make it uncomfortable to be a pedestrian in Woodstock. Next slide, please. Here's a project timeline. Of course, we started in December. Actually, we started in September, but we started the visioning and public engagement in December. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. We had a really innovative public engagement strategy that we're really proud of. After that, we created and started completing the strategy part of the document, and that includes some smart governance goals and some policies that we need to enact, and also, what the infrastructure in the city needs to be in order to carry on some of these smart cities projects. In April, we started working on the main corridor study work, and May, continuing corridor study and recommendations. In the summer, we had a great site visit and an awesome intern from Georgia Tech helping with research and next steps. And now we're working on the deliverables, as I said. Next slide, please. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Eric Lusher, who is our one of the consultants on the project, and he just really helped us start with this awesome public engagement strategy that we have here. So take it away, Eric.
Great, thank you, Katie. So to speak to that awesome community process that we utilized during this study, we started off with really trying to ask folks some big, broad questions about what smart technology could do for the city of Woodstock. And a little bit of the innovation that we went ahead and moved forward with from an engagement perspective is we did what we refer to as intercept interviews. And some of these photos here sort of display this. We just went out in the community and talked to people. We were at various events. These are things that are, a little dicier during COVID, but thankfully this was back in like December, January of the past year. So we were able to be at lots of things and talk to a handful of folks, about 95 people. And then we also supplemented that with an online survey where we got 374 online responses. Next slide. And the results, which will pop up on the next slide, of this were really helpful at helping us to understand what we had predicted that transportation people saw as what they were most hopeful that smart technology could address. As you can see with these 10 categories, we had, again, 10 very broad of how we may be able to use smart technology within the city. But what rose to the top was fundamentally about transportation, primarily improving vehicle, pedestrian, bicycle safety, and then also improving travel times. Next slide, please. And that helped us pivot into thinking more specifically about the downtown corridor area. So this was a longer survey that included multiple choice questions and lots of information related to demographics. The centerpiece of it beyond the survey was a mapping feature. Lots of really great input that we received through this feature. And on the next slide, we're actually going to depict that for you. This was all online, screenshot of the mapping tool. People were able to place pins down on a map of the downtown area and provide all types of comments. We had 181 initial pins, so people basically made an initial 181 comments. And what was really unique and very helpful with this tool is that people were then able to make comments on the comments. So there was sort of upvoting and downvoting relative to the initial comments, and we received an additional 836 up and down votes. So between the initial comments and those up and down votes, we had over 1,100 total comments that really helped us understand how we could focus some of our ideas and recommendations. So speaking of that, we are now going to pivot to a series of videos. First, some videos that will kind of show you on the ground what's happening in Woodstock and some of the issues that we heard from people that they were encountering. And then we'll go into a little bit of a roundtable discussion that we had as part of our on-site virtual event back in June, where we had some members the city leadership talk about into.
On this first video we're going to share with you, it's a driving tour, and it's really displaying what is often referred to as the Loop. This is the area of downtown that is very often, it's the area that a lot of people really want to park in. There's a lot of businesses and restaurants right there. So for a lot of people who come to downtown, especially if you're coming from the south, as this video is about to show you, this is how you want to go. So with that, let's go ahead and roll the video.
So here we are approaching downtown from the south. If you were coming into Woodstock from Highway 92, this is the way you would go. And if you've been here before, you're probably going to turn right here on Fowler Street and then make your way over to Chambers Street, which is the place where the most popular bars and restaurants and businesses are, such as Copper Coin, Century House, Pure, Ember Hot Yoga. So these are really the most coveted parking spaces in the city. So one of our main issues is people circling in this area looking for parking. So when you're driving down this road, it's hard to tell, is it a street, is it a parking lot? And the answer is it's a public street with on-street parking, but it really does feel like a parking lot, except for we have these crosswalks in a few different areas where it can be very hard to see pedestrians waiting. The on-street parking is good for walkability, though, rather than having large parking lots everywhere. But circling for prime spaces is really disruptive to the pedestrian experience in this area. So if there's anything we can do with smart technology to try to minimize that would be great. Frequent pedestrian crossings with limited visibility make it a bad place to be a car circling, or a person walking for that matter. Now, if you've gotten to this point and you haven't yet found parking, your instinct usually is to try this whole loop again instead of leaving the area to go to one of the satellite lots.
So now you've gotten a sense of what the drive can be like coming into downtown and sort of what that route looks like when you're trying to get to some of those prime spots. But in many cases, especially on an event or a busy weekend night, those spots aren't available. So very often people find themselves in some of the overflow lots, which are really more on the periphery of the central downtown area. So in this next video, we're going to show you what the walk is like coming from one of those lots. This is the City Center lot, which is in the northwest corner of the core downtown area. And we're going to be walking from that location over to a variety of businesses, including Pure Taqueria, which is basically in that loop that we showed you in the first driving video.
This is the City Center parking lot. There are 151 parking spaces here, and this is considered one of our overflow lots, and it's usually the largest lot that usually has open spaces. So on this little tour, we're going to walk from there to Pure. First, we get to this crosswalk, which is a mid-block crossing across Town Lake Parkway that has a push-button lighted sign that not everybody uses, but it does help to stop traffic. It may be harder to see it during the daytime for some cars. So here we go, walking along Town Lake Parkway in what is a very uncomfortable walking situation, so close to the traffic. But then when you turn here onto Main Street, you will see our beautiful streetscape that really puts some distance between the pedestrian and the traffic. As you can see here, we've got 2 levels of streetscape and then some on-street parking, street trees, street lights. So all those things contribute to making a more comfortable walking environment for the pedestrian. So if the entire walk from the overflow parking to the destination is like this, that would be great. Here we are crossing over Mill Street. This is one of our signalized crossings. It's currently a one-way street, but it's going to be converted into a 2-way street soon with one of our upcoming projects. Walking a little further down our beautiful streetscape here, we're coming to the Elm Street crossing, and this is an unsignalized crossing. Going to turn left here to cross over Main Street, and here we've got another pedestrian activated lighted sign that helps you cross the street because this is another unsignalized intersection. Here's one of the comments we received on Social Pinpoint, our mapping survey. At night and even during the day, it can be a challenge to see pedestrians. In Austria, they used focused lighting that makes the walkway very visible at night. The way the light aims down, only the crossing is lit up. Extremely useful at night. There are challenges, including that it can be difficult for drivers to see pedestrians waiting to cross on the side of the road due to some visual clutter that we have in the area with these planters and the signs. We've got street lights. So there are a lot of things in the area that may impede seeing pedestrians clearly. Continuing our walk, we are getting to our pedestrian railroad crossing. We were lucky a few years ago to be able to coordinate with the railroad to have lights and gates installed here for a safe pedestrian crossing. And the next crosswalk takes you over the Chambers Street. As we drove through here before, this is the parking loop that's really popular, and many drivers are likely to be more focused on finding that prime spot since they're circling in this area rather than watching for pedestrians to cross in the many different crosswalks we have over the streets in this area. Full parking spots can also obscure where pedestrians are waiting to cross the street. So here you can see this popular public space anchors the east side of our downtown. And as you can see, we've been successful in doing a lot of things to improve the pedestrian experience and to offset the perceived inconvenience of parking in one of the overflow lots. But we also still have a lot of challenges that we're hoping to use smart technology to address.
And now we'll look at options for rethinking some of our spaces on Main Street.
We're currently headed down Main Street here into downtown. You can see Rootstock and Vine there on the right. This traffic light in front of us is Town Lake Parkway and Arnold Mill Road. This is one of the areas that we think that could benefit from a flexible curbside. You can see the parallel parking spots on the left there. And imagine if just for a few hours on days that we can designate that those parking spots are no longer parking spots. They become things like a loading zone for deliveries or an Uber drop-off point for our summer concert series, or even something that we haven't thought of yet, like maybe small pop-up shops or even bike parking for when we have the Tour of the Southern Highlands race come through. And then after that event or situation is over, they go back to parking spots. So we're never really losing anything. We're just creating a flexible zone where it's not fixed. This specific area was chosen as one of the possible places to benefit from a curbside like this is because it has really good connectivity to main arteries like Main Street, Town Lake Parkway, and I-575. So that way, if we ever used it for something like Uber drop-offs, then it would be easier to be dropped off here in this location than to have your Uber driver fight something like Chambers Street or East Main or Elm Street, places that get notoriously congested. So that way you are out of the Uber quicker and that Uber is back on its way faster. And you're still in downtown, so even if you were dropped off here, it's a quick walk to get anywhere. Of course, we also want to find other areas that might be able to benefit from a flexible curbside, especially the areas that surround the restaurants, where we can handle things like loading zones that are notorious for taking up parking, and then also for Uber Eats and Grubhub and DoorDash pickups.
And that is a panel discussion with a group that we have affectionately referred to as the Brain Trust of Woodstock. And these are several individuals and staff that you've already heard from on and off throughout today's events. But to call them out again, we're going to have Katie O'Connor, the Senior City Planner, Brian Stockton, the Economic Development Director, Rob Hogan, the Assistant City Manager over Public Works, and then Brantley Day, the Community Development Director, all join us for a conversation about where we go from here. For our first question, I'd like to direct this at Brantley, Community Development Director. What initially attracted you and the City of Woodstock to the Georgia Smart Challenge?
Thank you, Eric. I would say the opportunity to innovate. We saw the program as just a real opportunity, especially based on the class, I guess, of 2018, seeing what Chamblee had done in Gwinnett County and others. And innovation is something that we really, I think has been shown today, is something that we really embrace in Woodstock. And so, the opportunity to work with Georgia Tech and work with the Atlanta Regional Commission and Georgia Power and our other partners to find innovative solutions to the challenges that have been discussed today, that was really what drew us to it, the program. And, we want to make sure that we, continue to provide a high quality of life here at the city to serve our citizens and business owners at the highest level. And we thought that, the Georgia Smart Challenge would again, provide the opportunity to work with emerging smart technologies to enhance our community for the future. And as you know, kind of a three-tiered process or approach was laid forth, and that included developing a process to guide our smart technology decision-making and long-term strategy, learn more about how their communities are embracing technology in their community's development, and of course, move towards implementation of the most promising and beneficial technologies for Woodstock. So we wanted to make sure that we could learn, but then adapt it for our needs specifically here in Woodstock. And that's what drew us to the program.
That's great. And thinking a little bit about, from a staff point of view, I'll direct this at Katie, Senior City Planner. Why is smart technology, in your opinion, needed in Woodstock, given all that?
Well, you've seen a lot of it today, and I've said it before, actually, and you know, we were thinking this when we were writing the proposal, as a matter of fact, is that, you know, I think one of our most important things is balancing pedestrian safety and comfort with the commuter transportation, commuter throughput, traffic efficiency. So, you know, everybody wants to move fast in their car through downtown Woodstock, and everyone walking and being on a bike want to be safe and comfortable. And so those are things that are kind of in constant conflict. And, you know, of course, we have other issues like the parking and a variety of other things. But, you know, for me, I was really hoping that we would be able to deal with our you know, the transportation balance that we have here of all the different modes of transportation. So, you know, focusing on a mobility project. And it's really, you know, the best thing about that for me was seeing the community input after the first survey we did, where we asked the community, you know, what benefits of smart technology are most important to them. The top two benefits came back as pedestrian safety and transportation efficiency. And so it was, you know, I did not like set that up, but it was really cool to have that reinforced. You know, you can see that in the proposal and then in the survey results.
Great. And Brian, economic development. What do you think are some of the implications on the economic development side for smart technology, and how can it be used to make Woodstock even more successful?
I think building on what Katie just said, if we can educate or use technology to get people to those remote parking lots that you saw on the driving tour that have somewhere around 300 parking spaces in them and are hardly ever used, and make them understand that that's really, both of those tours, if you did it in real time, were about a 5-minute walk from each of the spaces. So how do we educate through social media or utilize technology to show people that they can park there and get to where they need to go instead of expecting parking right up front, which obviously when you put a lot of surface parking in a downtown, it kills that vibrancy Katie was just talking about. So in my office, we've talked about things like that, and our wonderful GIS manager, who's the Wizard of Oz behind this program you're seeing today, Katie, thank you very much, overlaid a Walmart on downtown. And what we intend to do is sort of show people that when you go in Walmart, you park in the parking lot and you go to get a gallon of milk, it's just as far as walking from the city center lot to Pure to have a margarita. So I think both through outreach and education and technology, we can do that. I think the other thing, and we've talked about this with the curb lane flexibility, is deliveries. We don't have delivery areas downtown, so sometimes that loop, especially that we drove through earlier, you have a lot of conflicts during delivery times and backing traffic up. So I think utilizing technology for the places to schedule and get deliveries, and then that flexibility on the curb is probably going to be helpful too.
Great, thank you, Brian. So this next question is for Rob, Public Works. So from your perspective, you know, we've heard a lot about some of the transportation challenges, but I'd love to hear from you, especially from that Public Works perspective. Can you describe some of those dynamics in the transportation system downtown, and you know, what things do you think are particularly problematic, and likewise, how do those dynamics change depending on the time of day or year or relative to events and things like that?
Thanks, Eric. I think that those dynamics have been well chronicled so far throughout the presentations. But from a timing standpoint, what people, the audience here should realize is that these special events that we talk about, the great concerts we have, and some of the other great special events are extraordinary events, and we take special provisions for those. What most people fail to recognize is that we've really become a festival every day of the year at this point. So it's not just the special events. We're now concentrating on the everyday activity. We really are a festival from Thursday through Sunday, and oftentimes even Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday at this point. And so there's also a time of day difference as well. So we certainly are in have greater challenges during the rush hours. The morning rush hour is difficult because it coincides with school time. The evening rush hour gives us special issues because it's in conflict with the destination traffic that is coming to downtown to go to the shops and the restaurants and the bars and the like. So the time of day and day of the week certainly makes a difference, but it's a festive atmosphere virtually every day of the year at this point. And that's why we're participating in the Smart Cities program to help us through some of those challenges. One of the challenges I would add, Eric, is that this is a traditional suburban part of the metro Atlanta area. So we are recent development toward the new urban pedestrian-friendly type of environment. So the people we have participating in this popularity of Woodstock right now are oftentimes new to it. That's both from a vehicular driver standpoint. They're not necessarily as attuned to pedestrians as they need to be, and the pedestrians are the same way. They're used to walking through parking lots instead of downtown, and that makes a pretty substantial challenge for us. So I think that some of the other challenges that have already been mentioned about the pedestrians, the on-street parking, and the delivery trucks, I'll give you just one example of how that impacts us. We have 3 traffic signals right there on Main Street, right in a very short 4-block area or so. And timing of those lights is very important to us. And as they are retimed, we still see a lot of frustration because just imagine you're in a train of vehicles waiting of, let's say, 30 vehicles, and your vehicle number 20, and you see 3 traffic signals in front of you, and they're all green, and you're wondering why the traffic in front of you is not moving, and it's frustrating. What they don't see, obviously, is 20 cars in front of them. There's someone waiting for a car to pull out of an on-street parking spot so that they can grab that on-street parking spot, or there's pedestrians crossing one of the many mid-block crossings, so they're waiting for those pedestrians, which makes the vehicular traffic all the more frustrated and the traffic problem even greater than it would be if it was normal through traffic in a suburban atmosphere. So that's some of the additions to the challenges that we face.
That's great, Brentley, and that's very exciting news to hear about the LCI grant, and certainly timely given all the work that City is doing with smart technology and how that can integrate with things moving forward. To follow up a little bit on that note, you can see this other question. How does the character, and you touched upon this a little bit, but how does the character specifically in downtown and that vision factor into the smart technology piece?
Well, I appreciate that, and I can't take credit for this idea. This is all Katie. But one thing that we do struggle with is everybody is always concerned about their signage. We deal with signage quite a bit here in community development for businesses, whether that be permanent signs or temporary signs or any kind of signage. And so one thing that we've really not gotten into too much, especially in downtown, is electronic signs and electronic signage. It's just not something that's been part of our fabric here in Woodstock. And so in looking at what the options are for that, we know that going forward, there may be a need for that with some of the projects that are coming in the future. And so one thing that Katie actually, I think working with the project team here has already found is that the typical kind of flashing and, maybe some might say unattractive electronic signs, that's not the only option, right? So there are electronic ink signs which are black and white, like a Kindle screen, that would display, have a display that would be, I think, a little bit more in keeping with the character that we've set forth here in downtown Woodstock. And, looking at what, sensors or antennas and things like that, might need to be, for example, with 5G and the other technologies coming in, the small wireless facilities, we've looked at, how can we incorporate those facilities into our existing character on decorative light poles, on different kinds of structures. So you have the data and you have the need met, but you're not seeing something that maybe is not in keeping with the character. And so looking at signs and looking at, how we work with those kind of technologies is something that interests us a great deal, and I think is a great part of what we're talking about with this project.
Fantastic. So to pivot a little bit, knowing that a lot of the direction we're going in is specifically on the transportation side, this question is directed at Rob of Public Works. What do you think, in terms of transportation improvements, what excites you most about these selected projects?
Well, there's a number, Eric, and one is the illuminated crosswalks, for sure, because that's very important to us. I think it's a technology that's available and would be extremely useful in our circumstances. In particular, there's a lot of distraction at eye level now for the vehicles that are going across these pedestrian crosswalks, and having illumination at the road level, I think will have a fantastic improvement on safety. So that's one of the things that excites me the most. Another one would be the wayfinding for the parking, because we're convinced that there's a certain percentage of the traffic that we have now is unnecessary because they are circling looking for a parking spot, or it's unnecessary because they have to go a roundabout way to get to a particular parking lot. So all the changes that we can make to make that or to allow that parker to go directly from their entrance into the downtown area to their parking spot is going to make a tremendous difference for us from a traffic standpoint. And then I'm also very excited about the concept of connected vehicle programs. And I think in the long run, our infrastructure within the city, especially at the streets, needs to be connected to the vehicles that are going by. And that may be a little bit further down the road, but I'm excited about that particular technology as well.
Certainly, that's kind of in the big picture. That's certainly something that a lot of people are very interested in and have expressed a lot of kind of wonder what that's going to look like. So I certainly hope and expect that will be something we're talking about in the long term in Woodstock. This next question is for Katie, and I'm going to kind of dub you, Katie, as the community whisperer, so to speak, especially because as you put together the proposal initially, you correctly predicted that transportation was going to be the hot topic once we went out and did our surveys. So with that caveat and that background, what do you think? What technologies do you think the Woodstock community and the citizens are going to be the most excited about as we start pulling things out?
Well, I have to say, you don't really have to be like a community whisperer to know that traffic and transportation is something people want to talk about around here, because traffic and parking are literally like something that everybody who works here hears about from citizens on a daily basis. We talk about it on a daily basis because we know it's their, people's biggest issue. So, I think that the citizens are going to be most excited probably about the parking availability. if they can have a good way to find parking before they get all the way into downtown and like go to one of their, satellite lots first, I think that would cut down on everybody's time trying to get somewhere. But also, I think that citizens don't really perceive the whole circling issue that Rob was talking about. I don't think that people, I would like to predict, and I hope that if we get parking availability, installed here in a major way, I really think that the whole entire traffic problem is going to be helped in downtown. And I don't know that people are even going to really notice like what's different, but when you remove all those cars that are circling, there's got to be a difference that is going to be felt in a major way there. So I think anything that helps parking or helps people, drive through downtown Woodstock faster is what they're going to be most excited about.
Great. And to put you on the spot personally and individually, as the project lead, what has you the most excited?
Well, for me, I am the most excited about the curb lane flexibility. So I think if we can have some parking spaces in key areas switch from like parking to Uber drop off to restaurant delivery to loading zone, all depending on the time of day or the events that are planned, I think that we can make the most of our limited parking. I mean, we do have enough parking. I think all of us around here feel that and have seen that the lack of parking is more of a perception than a literal lack of parking, and the lack of parking is really more a lack of parking exactly where you want it to be the first time you look for it rather than a lack of parking overall. So we do have limited parking, but there are a lot of other things that we also have limited areas for, like loading zones, and I don't know how much of a problem Uber pickups and drop-offs are, but I think it would be nice to have a dedicated area sometimes for them. So the thing that's most exciting to me about that is just how many different possibilities there are to take some, parallel or angled parking spaces we have and change them into something temporarily, something totally different. Like, imagine if like 3 parallel parking spaces are suddenly turned into outdoor dining for some of our restaurants that now have to limit their number of people they have inside. So, I think the options for that are not limited. So that's why I'm so excited about that one.
Okay, just give me 1 second. I'm going to transition to slide share.
Well, as Steve is loading that up, hopefully those videos gave you a taste of what's happening on the ground and then what a lot of the thinking is amongst some of the city leadership. Part of that thinking was reflected in some of the things that we did throughout this process, where we really used all that survey data and then obviously a lot of that on-the-ground knowledge shortlist our initiatives, as you can see here on this screen. On the next slide, we sort of depict how we went and used all of this information we received and really used that to build a data-driven process. Steve, if you don't mind, go to the next slide. And that data-driven process was used to make sure that we were being objective in our sort of decision making. So we had lots of different initiatives that we were thinking of from a smart technology point of view, but we wanted to use that data-driven process, which again was informed by all this community input we have and some other things, to make sure that the recommendations that we had were right for the city of Woodstock. Next slide, please. Looks like we might be having some slight technical difficulty on the PowerPoint.
Yeah. I am on the next slide.
Oh, I'm okay. Yes. So this slide, as you can see here, shows basically how that prioritization process worked and how we used lots of different sort of prioritization tools and different ideas, take all the strategies that we have and then turn them into what we refer to as tier 1 and tier 2 recommendations, so that we really could advance what we thought would be appropriate pilot projects. So real quick on the next slide, we've kind of talked about and hinted at this a little bit on the videos, but our first our first pilot project is these illuminated sidewalks, and this is something that's really captured a lot of interest. So this is something that the city's really looking at as the potential thing to implement pretty soon, hopefully. The second initiative on the next slide is all about parking availability, and we're still working through a little bit what the mechanism and medium for that would be. But the idea is to find ways to, well, certainly collect real-time parking availability data, and then find ways to share that information with the driving public. And then our final initiative that we're really focusing on is curb lane flexibility, as you can see here on this slide. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Siva to talk about some of the details. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. So that's for Katie and the panel, and Eric has kind of underscored the transportation infrastructure needs, and then the parking as a highlight in there. So this particular slide here that kind of highlights, we talked a lot about parking availability, parking kind of features as a main solution that forms as part of the smart city initiative. So if you see here Woodstock, the parking, this is from the GIS data set from the City of Woodstock, and it's really spatially distributed all across the downtown core here. And then the 3 areas that are highlighted in yellow are the most sought after parking areas in the city. And it's because of the proximity to the core intersection right here on the main street, and the congestion that's generated because people are looking for close and the proximity, the parking to this area, and there seems to be some circling around, some idle time spent on here that contributes to the traffic congestion here. And but if you look at the top left, the little map that I show you, there's the circles that you see, the 1, 2, 3. The third one is the sweet spot. If you look at the quarter-mile radius from the Main Street intersection, it's about roughly 10 to 12-minute walking distance, and all of the city's points of interest. Your businesses, your other attractions, and the storefronts, all of them fall in there. So this map right here that shows all the parking, it falls well within it. So the like Katie rightly pointed out, the lack of parking is a perceived notion, especially for the visitors who come in. If you just step back 1 or 2 streets down, there's plenty of parking. But the concern that citizens are expressing there is in the non-availability of parking. So we have to have some solution. Adding to that, the parking is not charged here in the city. So it's a free parking, and we don't have a vertical, like a parking deck that can accommodate concentrated parking spaces in one structure. It's really spread out. And another issue also is that, the parking spaces are kind of like a first come, first served. Now, I could pull in the morning and then leave it there for the rest of the day. So there is no impact for me in the sense that, but it does have impact from the other potential uses for the space. So there is no rotation of parking spaces. So that is another thing that needs to be kind of thought to also. So on the right now, there is lack of parking availability information. So this idea about parking, how do we make this parking information available to the visitors is a main issue. But if you look at the current practices in the industry about parking availability, is commercial solutions are there, but it is really for targeting for parking decks or gated lots. And the solutions that are behind the scenes are like, with sensor-based technology, if you want to know individual parking spaces, whether it is occupied or not, or like a counters, how many, maybe, 20 out of 50 spaces are available. So it's like as a gated counter. So you have these kind of solutions are available, and then there are parking guiding systems are available. But the issue with that is when you have free parking and when you don't have a revenue stream to support one of these technology solutions, then it makes it hard for to implementing a solution. So the approach that the City of Woodstock for us as a research fund is looking at is what else can we do, or what else can be attempted as a novel idea to see how we can come up with a solution that can kind of substitute adopting a commercial solution, because there's no way we can adopt a commercial solution that can target the majority of these parking spaces here. So this slide here kind of shows you the time series. I'm not doing this time series, but this underscores the parking, how fast it fills up, and it stays filled up during peak hours. So the congestion is really around the core of the downtown area. So what would it take? So this particular parking lot is one of the main parking lots that is highlighted as a close sought after place right here. And the view here is a couple of different views we've captured as a drone footage. So an example here is, what if you have a fixed camera mounted on a structure, whether at the top of a building or maybe on a lamppost or maybe an individual structure that is erected maybe about 200 feet above, that has a vantage point of this parking area that covers every parking spaces, and then use some of the technology solutions that potentially could be customized and kind of combined together with off-the-shelf products and come up with parking availability. So the idea here is to have a fixed mount camera, with either a broadband or a Ethernet-based network connection that captures either video feed or photographic snapshot at frequent intervals, and then that image is stored in some storage device and run it through an image classification or object detection type of algorithm. And with trained data from these specific areas, or there are other data sets out there which can be employed in training that and realistically coming up with a close to a real-time type of information. So that is one approach, and then once you get that, you can have a database of sorts, and then that could be kind of pushed out at a very basic level. And Brantley had mentioned that Woodstock is not really a big fan of big electronic flashy signs, and so some type of very basic either a number or either the full or available, or some indication that the 4 different entry points in 575 and from Highway 92 or maybe Arnold Mill Road or Town Lake Parkway area, some different vantage points, so we can have but the key here is the connectivity and solutions that are available to be adapted and modified and customized to Woodstock cases. So these 2 parking lots, one that Katie had mentioned about this overflow parking lots near the Elm Street Arts Theater behind, it's 150 parking spaces, and this one has about 50 some parking spaces. These 2 are probably candidates for doing a little trial run on this. We are doing a variety of background research on this and looking at different open source and other established processes that could be adapted potentially right here. So basically applying some deep learning, either the image classification approach or an image detection approach. The classification is going to use predefined parking spaces to see whether there is some object there or not. The object detection will detect how many cars are there in this lot, and you can get a count on it. So this is just a quick overview of what it is. So then following up with that is the data governance sections. When we have technology solutions deployed, and we're going to be collecting data, either active, passive data, and how are we going to manage the data, who has access to it, what can you do with it, and so forth, and what type of framework we're going to choose, and how interoperable it is or open source. So a charter that kind of aligns with Woodstock goals, and then puts a citizen-centric approach in the front. And that is will be a focus of some of the research area for us. Sorry. And that's it. I'll pass down to Katie.
All right. Hello, everybody. So next we have just a quick showcase of our work from our Smart Woodstock intern this summer. She was great, and she created 3 fact sheets for these 3 technologies that go way further into detail with research with the technologies and how to implement them, how to do pilot projects. The work she did for us was really great. And she also put together this research guide in Smart Cities Playbook that gives a little more research and also some policy recommendations, some pricing information on these different technologies. So these documents are really going to help get us on our way quickly to being able to implement some of these projects. Next slide, please. So for challenges and lessons learned, I'm not gonna read all of these. I just want to go through very quickly, but say that, for the main challenge for us in the project was the nebulous nature of the project, because it's a plan rather than an actual pilot project. We had a little bit of confusion on how to move forward, but in the end, with so many parties on our project team, that's kind of where we had some challenges, but in the end, it's really come together, and I'm so grateful that we had so many different opinions and skill sets on our team. Next slide, please. So for the impact currently, the main impact so far is that this has been a 100% public-driven approach. We already told you about all the public engagement that we did, and receiving all these responses really did help form our recommendations and prioritize projects, as Eric was talking about earlier. And we also engaged our local leadership. So the mayor and council, planning commission, state representatives, they have been involved in this project from the start. So having these thought leaders and all the leadership aware of these recommendations and in support of these recommendations, I feel like getting the buy-in this early is really going to help us actually implement the plan. Next slide, please. Future impact, we're going to be able to have some specific public input meetings on our pilot projects, potentially adding smart strategies to our long-term plans. The recommendations in this plan are going to go in our next LCI plan update, which is the next big plan that we're doing. And then it's probably going to work its way into our comprehensive plan when that gets updated as well. And we've already put some, following the Smart Woodstock plan on the short-term work program, which is our annual update for our comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. So next, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, is year 2 for the pilot projects. And so the first project that we're hoping we're going to pilot is the in-roadway warning lights for one of our mid-block crosswalks in town. Next slide, please. We have a lot of options for future funding. For the crosswalk I was just talking about, it's in the first bullet point here. We think we can get one crosswalk done for around $20,000 or less, and our leadership has already expressed interest in self-funding that technology. So we're really excited to hopefully get started with that soon. But we're also going to have Livable Centers Initiative funds available. SPLOST funding could potentially contribute to this project. And there are also state and federal options too. Next slide. And here is our project team contact information. This is, besides we've got a sponsor slide after this, but this is the last slide in our presentation. So now might be a good time to start with the question and answer. And it looks like we only have a few minutes left, but we've got some good Q&A here.
Thank you, Katie, Eric, and Siva. This has been really great. I feel always, I've seen the Woodstock tour a few times now, but it's always nice to go through the tour of Woodstock. It's always refreshing and very safe given a virtual state. And I think I appreciate, this is probably our first meta presentation where we had a presentation within a presentation for our webinar series. So I feel like a lot of the questions actually were answered as part of the presentation or presentations. But let me start with a few with the final 5 minutes or so. Katie, can you actually, of course, this project began before the pandemic and has occurred during the pandemic and beyond. Can you talk about how you've thought about social distancing as it relates to some of the plan and the walk-in and some of the measures that you had to rethink a little bit?
Absolutely, yeah. So the biggest change to the process of this project was actually taking the site visit to a virtual meeting instead of, we were originally planning on doing in-person walking tours around our downtown with a bunch of different groups to do a walk audit to see how the pedestrian felt in our environment. And so we quickly had to pivot to doing the video walking tour that you saw a few of. We did more tours than that, but you saw a snippet of what we showed the public. So that's one way that COVID majorly affected the project, but it's also affecting the recommendations too. For example, with the in-pavement illuminated crosswalk, there are 2 different activation modes you can choose. Actually, there are several different activation modes. You can either have, active activation where you would push a button and turn the lights on, or passive activation. And with COVID, that seems like the direction that we would want to go. So when a person walks into the crosswalk, maybe there's a heat sensor or a motion sensor and the lights turn on without them having to actually touch anything.
Nice. Another question we're getting from our panel and audience is obviously around parking, and we've done a lot about the parking. Siva's done a really good deep dive on the parking, but can you talk a little bit about how you thought about parking as a pricing mechanism, whether it's for congestion pricing or whether you thought of it to convert parking into some sort of fee-paying infrastructure?
Absolutely. We have thought about that a lot, and actually we've had parking consultants involved to do, official parking studies and to make recommendations to our mayor and council. And Charging for parking definitely is something that could reduce congestion in the most coveted parking spaces, but over the years, our council has talked about charging for parking again and again, and they've usually, in the past always said that they really didn't want to charge for parking in downtown Woodstock. And we also, our parking studies have shown that we don't actually have a lack of parking in downtown Woodstock. It's really just more of a perceived lack of parking. So, the big challenge for us is how can we do this parking availability and lead people to the parking that they need to find without charging for it? Because charging for parking would be so easy because we could use the Park Mobile app. We would know where the spaces are. It would help us get this project done a lot simpler, but that's why Siva took his research to the place of, trying to find open software that we could use to do the parking availability project without having a fee-based system. So, the council may be open to charging for parking in the future. They are open to timed parking, and so we're going to start looking at a strategy like that. But, if we can solve the problem without people having to pay for parking, we think that would be the best ultimate option.
So another question that we have from our audience is for the non-car centric travel modes, so bicycles and scooters and everything in between that. How have you thought about those alternative transit options and fitted in that master plan and public space?
We actually, one of our recommendations is autonomous personal vehicles. And so that's not a technology that's really available yet as far as we can tell, but, it would be like the scooters that a lot of cities have, and they're all over the sidewalk. Our council decided a while ago that we definitely did not want to have that service in our city. And so they actually wrote an ordinance to ban the scooters, especially back when they were very popular. But if we could have personal transportation like that, that's on demand without all the sidewalk clutter, meaning the autonomous vehicles, come to you when you call them and then go park themselves when you're done, I think that's something we would be very interested in. And it is one of our tier 2 recommendations, one of our future recommendations.
Yes, and I know Peachtree Corners actually has piloted the autonomous scooter that they're doing. So that might be something to go in the wave of the future. This is great. Thank you so much, Eric, Siva, and Katie. For those in the audience, this webinar is recorded along with the slides. So if you have any additional questions or want to review this forward, please feel free to contact Katie, Eric, or Siva and review the webinar at your convenience. Thank you to our Georgia Smart partners. Obviously, this is really a part of a greater smart community challenge that we've been doing each year, and really congratulate Woodstock for a fantastic year-long engagement with us on this project, especially in partnership with ARC, given their guidance. This is the Smarter Together webinar series. We are slated to do this for the rest of the fall semester. So it's every Thursday at noon. So next Thursday, we'll have another Georgia Smart Community presenting their final presentation. So please stay tuned for that. Thank you again, and please take care.
Thank you. Bye.